chance to hear it, so let her tell it. People on the streets say Sabrina Speaks. Tune into the show, she will let you know. Tell all your friends and family. Real talk is no joke. You get the news straight up from grassroots and concerns. You can hear with some people gone. So tell all your friends to tune in to
Good evening, Cayman. I'm Sabrina Turner, and welcome to Sabrina Speaks, your daily dose of clarity, truth, and community insights. Every weekday from 5 to 6:30 p.m., we're tackling the issues that affect you, from national headlines to grassroots concerns. Whether you're in traffic or winding down your day, this is your chance to hear it straight and speak your truth. So buckle up, Cayman. We're not holding back.
This is the show. We gotta let you know. Now we got to go.
And now here's Sabrina.
Hello, and happy Monday, start of a new week. And I'm hoping that you had a fantastic weekend as we aim now to pretty much wrap up summer vacation, because reality strikes as of Wednesday when pretty much all schools are back in. But it is a pleasure to be here with you for another episode of Sabrina Speaks, the podcast where voices rise, stories unfold, and inspiration definitely is taking center stage. I'm your host, Sabrina, and again, it is a pleasure to be here with you. I'm hoping that you're loving and you're still continuing to enjoy the content shared on this space. And if you are, please don't forget to go ahead and follow, share, and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And you can find myself on YouTube and Facebook pages. And my Facebook is Sabrina Turner. And you will see community activists right there. Just click the follow button so you will be updated all the time. We're also streaming on all CMR, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram platforms as well. But yes, you can join in on the discussion. 936-8255 is the number to call. And we always like your participation, of course, because you're the reason why we're here. And for all of those persons who continue to follow me and subscribe, I want to thank you. Thank you so much. You are most loved here, and you will see the family here is just dynamic. We're unique in our own way. But yeah, just a heads up, the content you're about to hear, including any discussions or opinions from myself, my guests, and our participants, is intended solely for general informational and entertainment purposes. This is not a substitute for professional, legal, medical, or financial advice. So I encourage you to consult with a qualified professional for specific concerns that may affect you. Sabrina Speaks disclaims all liability for any decisions or actions taken in reliance on the information presented here. But it is indeed a pleasure to be back. And today we're continuing with a very informative discussion that I had with Mr. Sammy Jackson as it pertains to development here, where the Cayman Islands is going, sustainable development. And that was such a jam-packed show that, we had to actually bring him back. So I was, I'm excited that he is able to join me again today. And I am just ecstatic for that. So I'm having something popping up here on the screen. Let's see. Let me just do this for now because I would have no clue what to do right now, but I'll figure you out afterwards. My apologies. Whoops. Yeah, there's some things happening behind the scenes here. So yeah, let's get started. I'm wishing everyone a happy Monday, and here's to wishing you a magnificent Monday and an awesome week ahead. And honestly, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Lots of things going on, not only here, but also in our region. You know that we have a crew over there, a delegation over there in Barbados. And I have been sharing a lot of stuff with you. And so is Sandra on her platform. So I'm hoping that you're enjoying the content. And I know, Connie, I got an image that I'm about to display on the screen. I know you're here. And you were first. Yes, you were first today. So welcome. Happy Monday to you. Likewise. And CE Banks, hello. Nice to have you. Jimbo's in the house. Yes, it's always a pleasure to see you guys. And I look forward to seeing all of you, to be honest with you. It is a pleasure. But yeah, I was telling you, we got a group over in Barbados. Cara Festa is going on. And let me tell you something. I salute Barbados. That jurisdiction knows how to throw a party. I'm not there in person, but what I have been feeling through all the videos, Barbados Today, through their news channels, Cara Festa on Instagram, the Reels, the Facebook pages, they're doing an excellent job with sharing the information. Our delegation down there is also sharing and updating their website as well. But let me tell you something. Barbados knows how to throw a party. And I say that this is the Olympics of the arts. And Barbados, congratulations to you. So far, so good. I'm just waiting to get a rundown of exactly what the feeling was on the ground. But from all accounts, we're seeing where our delegation is obviously, I'm going to add to the screen here, it's having a blast. There's our minister and Kendall, and I don't remember this gentleman's name. But they're there. And we got some of our dancers. They're at the Hilton over there in Barbados. Yes, and they are just having a good time. Look at Ruthie. I see these two ladies. They were marching in. They had this whole parade of all of the jurisdictions, and that was on Friday. And that was amazing to see some of the video clippings and stuff with how the vibe was there. And one of the highlights I saw yesterday as well was the art. Yeah, Connie, look at her handbag. You look like somebody that would get in trouble. And I feel it. The art over there is amazing. I see some hand with all leather works and all that sort of stuff, and some slippers and earrings and all that sort of. Connie, I know this is you, I feel that. But look at these, Connie, and everybody else who's into shoes. Look at that. Look at the level of craftsmanship, But it's not just all. This was a grand market that they had yesterday. And these were some of the images that were shared. And it was all sorts of the stuff being showcased there. Jamaica had a stand. You had Guyana, who had a lot of their artwork as well. You had handmade jewelry that just put jewelry at a different level. I'm going to take this out because I got some more images that I want to share with you. But it's just amazing how talented the people are over there and all the artwork that they have on display. This was another piece of jewelry. Again, this is all handmade. Look at that. It's amazing what we're seeing happening over there and displayed. I'm really hoping that, one day we could probably host something like this here. But boy, definitely Barbados threw it down. But I'm quite sure throughout my colleague's career, this may be one of the most memorable things that he will have. That's the Honorable Isaac Rankin, our Minister for Youth, Sports and Culture. He shared an image on his page today with him delivering a letter from the Honorable Premier, Andre Ebanks, to the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley. And that was her opening that document and the letter here from our Honorable Premier, and I'm quite sure on behalf of us, the people of the Cayman Islands. But this image really solidified everything for me, and it says so much. Look at that. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why we are one people, one Caribbean. That embrace speaks so loud because at the end of the day, we're all one, just surviving here and living amongst each other. And what that just speaks volumes. And but yeah, I want to congratulate everyone for representing us. They're all ambassadors over there. And kudos to the Premier for actually being a visionary and seeing the importance of communicating with one of our regional representatives. Because at the end of the day, we are one Caribbean, and you're hearing that ring out throughout these couple of days. The Carafesta celebrations, 15 years celebration continues, and it goes until the 31st. And I'm quite sure we will hear again from our people once they come back. So yes, I had to share that with you today, and I'm so excited. But going back to locally now, we have a lot of persons that are returning home from summer vacation. A lot of persons returned yesterday, and they continue to return today. And just before going live here, I noticed breaking news. It was New York Times that they have noticed COVID has spiked again. We know that a number of people here as well are reporting flu-like symptoms. And we are there. Based on this report that I'm seeing in the New York Times, it's that they're seeing where they have seen cases rise in wastewater in places such as Texas, Utah, Nevada, and they're finding high concentrations of it there. And also they're feeling that the reason why this is spreading is because, summer is such a hot time, and they're feeling that it's because everybody is just indoors and because to try to keep cool. So we have to be aware that I know a number of my friends were coming down with the flu here as well. So let me encourage you, anyone who actually is exhibiting flu-like symptoms, and school going back, you usually have stomach viruses and that sort of stuff. Colds tend to increase anyhow after the holidays. So I'm encouraging persons to just practice good, proper hand hygiene. I mean, a mere fact that you went away anyhow increases your risks. So let's help each other by just making sure that you practice good hand hygiene. And like I said, all schools, government schools, go back on Wednesday. So heads up, traffic is going to increase, and I want you to be aware of that. Make sure you wash your hands. And if you got flu-like symptoms, for God's sakes, just stay home or wear a mask. You don't know what you could be doing to somebody else around you who may have underlying conditions, persons, with diabetes, hypertension, cancer patients, or immune system that is low. You got to be careful. So let's help each other. Again, what's happening regional, I try to do this in a synopsis until my guest, Sammy, who's going to be joining me momentarily. I'm watching what's happening over there in Jamaica. On the 3rd, they're going to be having their elections. And last night, it was just as crazy. I was watching the 2 rallies that were being had. There was a rally by the JLP and another rally by the PNP. And I had one rally on the TV screen and another one from my phone. So yeah, tell me how I did it. But let me tell you, your girl did it. I was able to watch both rallies at the same time, and very, very interesting. Like I said, I can describe it almost like attending a concert. But what shook the night was when the PNP announced that all income earners under $3,500, no tax. No tax. And let me tell you something, it was like mic drop. If you didn't watch that live, you may have seen snippets of it today. It was mic drop. I mean, Mr. Golding did not even have to say very much more after that. That meeting actually ended with that. And let me tell you, it was a mic drop. What that actually translates to the people of Jamaica is that it indirectly directly will put more money into these people's hands. And my guest is here, good. And it was amazing. And looking at some of the commentary after the meeting, and there was another guy who was commenting on it with a live show afterwards. I think his name is Steven. Anyhow, what he said, and this is aligning with what's also in the public space, is that positively impacts almost every civil servant, including uniform services. So you're kind of looking, what is the JLP going to be doing now to try and match that? We all know that it's all promises right now, so to speak. But let me tell you something. If you wanted to get the people's attention and you're really following both sides, which is why I'm a firm believer that you should go to all the meetings, or even if you don't want to show up and I'm speaking in general now, it's a total different culture in Jamaica. But I don't just go one side, that side. I like to hear it all full circle. But that's just my opinion, to be honest. But it was amazing to compare. But like I said, at the end of the day, how can you beat no taxes? And for the amount of people that that's going to positively impact, I'm looking to see what the JLP is going to do. But they both have great things coming up. Who's going to deliver? I think, in my humble opinion, not forecasting, not being a political analyst, but just watching the dynamics of both sides, I feel this is going to be a really, really tight elections for Jamaica. And I think it's something that's worth watching if you enjoy following politics. I actually do. I just like to see their style. I like to listen to everybody. And yeah, it's just amazing what I'm seeing unfolding. And I guess I can appreciate it a bit more now because I've been there and I can somewhat understand the language a bit better. So yeah, but it's good to just have it from both sides. I'm not orange, I'm not green. I'm honestly just getting information as I learn more about the country, understanding their politics, and then I do my own research. I am not party A or party B. No, I'm not. I'm just reporting on my opinion. But I really like how they do their rallies in a sense where I like the music and I like how they just go on. And I mean, wow, it was a sea of orange. It was a sea of green. And based on what I could see on the two streaming apps, I would say they both had a darn good showing. Hence, just by eyeballing it, it's going to be close. So I can only wish both sides all the best, to be honest. And I'm hoping that it won't get out of hand and people just respect each other and that they'll have a incident-free elections. But without further ado, let's bring it back home. Oops, let's bring it back home. I'm tying up myself here with my earphones. Let's bring it back home and welcome my guest, Sammy. Sammy. Good evening. Welcome back to Sabrina Speaks. How are you?
Good evening, Sabrina. Good evening to your audience.
I'm hoping you had a good weekend and we're with everything that's going on regionally. I have to cover these things, Sam, because with all the great things.
Intently because I was going to say to you, I was going to message you and say, if we're talking about Jamaican politics, I'm not the guy because I can barely keep up with local politics.
No. I was merely just filling the gap because I realized what was happening. And, it just makes sense to just keep people in tune because now I'm being told by my household, you saw that you need to get Jamaican citizenship because you know more than us. But it's interesting. I mean,
we should keep an eye on the region, obviously,
yes,
and the world. But it's difficult these days, and it's difficult to sift through it all and figure out what's truth and what's propaganda.
Yeah.
So when they hear every day, to be honest.
When they hear me calling some names and this place is where they're going to build a new JPH and I'm calling it right. And they're like looking at me like, who are you? But it's interesting, very interesting. But yeah, let's jump straight into it, Sammy. I know we had a very fluid discussion the last time. Some of this topic is so vast that, we barely scratched the surface, but you're on the ground, you're big in development. I value your opinion. And like I said at the intro, these are only our views. These are based on your knowledge. This is just thought-provoking, informative discussions here. And, with the way we started off at the first time that we spoke, which actually was on the 5th of August, can you imagine how time flies? Well, I felt it was fitting for us to continue because I'm quite sure between then and now, we have seen a new planning board. We have seen a lot of things in the media, bringing things up to speed and just looking forward and what we need to know. But who best but you? Because you're so versed in this topic, which is why it is always a pleasure to have you with us.
Well, I try. Um, we, we do have a new, partial new planning board. They are going to have the same mandate that they had, the previous board had. I don't expect to see any dramatic changes there. They're not the policy makers. They're
Right.
not the lawmakers. They have to work within the confines of the framework that they're given. So I'm not expecting any dramatic change. Certainly not in policy or their approach to plan and control. For newer members, especially the uninitiated, it'll be a little bit of a learning curve. I think they had their introductory meeting the other day, and or orientation or whatever they call it, and the next meeting will be a live meeting, hearing applications, etc. But I wanted to talk some more about the big picture stuff, and
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
since coming on your show, I've had folks reach out to me talking to me about what do we do, how do we advance a development plan, and it simply takes political will, and it takes a commitment on the part of the government to sort of tap the people who can assist in that regard. The CPA is the power to amend the development plan or initiate the plan amendment is vested in the CPA. They make proposals. I think I said that last time.
Right.
And then that goes out for public consultation. The public can then get to weigh in, and then depending on what views, concerns, etc., opinions are proffered by members of the public, there are hearings by a development plan appeals tribunal that has been set up. So that's a good move.
Right.
Just recently, actually, by the new government. And I'm told that they are going to move forward with amending the development plan.
Nice.
And I had someone in government ask me if it's possible to do what I alluded to last time, which is amend it in 2 years. So it sounds ambitious. My response to that was yes, but you have to have the ability to, have folks focused on the task at hand. It's not easy. It's quite tedious. It is a protracted process. It's frustrating. I mean, the development plan gets amended from time to time. You often hear folks talk about rezoning land. Now, there's some confusion about rezoning land and sort of the CPA approving a variance for a different type of use within zones, because zoning is not inflexible. The development plan has said that from its inception. Now, what is the development plan about? Currently, it's based on a zoning map and a planning statement. The zoning map depicts certain zones, and there's the attendant provisions in the regulations and the planning statement that say what obtains in those zones. It's what we call a Euclidean type of plan and control. That is to say, it's based on land use. So, certain zones project or presume that certain development will be promoted in those zones, and then the regulations specify and the planning statement specify what that development ought to look like in general terms. And then ultimately, the CPA are guided by that, because especially the planning statement, it's a guidance document, a policy statement, so to speak. And the regulations are more prescriptive. They've become, in some ways, far too prescriptive, to the point where after they realized they were too prescriptive, they started to broaden the variance provision. So in certain circumstances and you'll hear that argument often, certain strokes for certain folks, different strokes for different
strokes for different folks.
You get variances and they might seem unjustifiable, but there's a regime that governs that that's fairly fair and robust and transparent. And if the CPA approaches that practice the way that is to say the process for variances, then I believe it's balanced and fair. Sometimes there are issues that seem a bit esoteric. Folks don't really focus on the salient points. They focus on something extraneous and get themselves wound up into a tizzy about it. But it's always good for the public to ask questions. I think the public should question more on every level, not just development planning. I mean, we this is important, but there are many things where we just sort of either take it for granted, or we let the process unfold, and then we complain about the aftermath or the effect of it. We need to probably move away from that. And part of that is being proactive with our development plan. Now, the development plan should be, like I said the last time, the blueprint of life in Cayman. And it speaks to things about the ultimate goal, or the primary goal being the protection and enhancement of the socioeconomic welfare of the people of the country. That's the starting point.
Right.
Now, we've had many attempts to enhance it significantly. Government after successive government have taken it on. They put labels on it that sounded all sexy and ambitious, like Plan Cayman. And in fact, it was just Plan West Bay Road. But we need to make an effort to progress this thing. Our legislative framework is old, right? So
yes, it is outdated.
But what has caused some problems from time to time is that we've gone along and piecemeal fashion and bolted on and then unbolted
ad hoc,
butchered here and there where it was convenient to certain special interests. We've taken out entire sections of and processes like Section 6 of the development and planning regulations, which catered specifically to large-scale projects which do need special consideration, given the infrastructural impacts and what have you. So if we have a development plan that says this is the mandate, and then we implement the necessary legislative changes vis-a-vis the regulations, and perhaps a few tweaks to the primary legislation too, the act itself, then we will go down the road that we need to go to managing plan and control in Cayman. Lots of folks are concerned now that it's run away because they see large buildings going up. To some extent, there's valid concerns because it seems that there's a disconnect between infrastructural upgrades and we wait until it's needed, desperately before we go down the path. And that the process for implementing infrastructure has become much more convoluted and complex and challenging, because now you have to go through an EIA process, and there's all of that that we've heard much about in recent years. So we have lots of challenges, and I fear the part of the problem is everybody's sort of attacking it from their angle, making valiant efforts for the most part to promote sort of the whatever the sphere is that they're in. They want to promote their initiatives, etc. But there's no unison. There's no acting together. There's no planning, sort of overall planning, a master planning for the country. I mean, the Sister Islands don't yet have a zoning map.
Yeah, you mentioned that on the last, the first time we spoke. Why?
Since the last occasion, we discovered to our horror that consequently, because of an oversight and legislative oversight.
But that should be an easy fix.
Of course, it's an easy fix. It just takes political will.
Okay.
But I remember distinctly some former director of planning telling me, sort of jokingly, that he went to the BRAC and met with the public and said, you need zoning for the Sister Islands. And they said, no, we were worried about that. And he said, no, what you have now is carte blanche. And they said, no, we need something more. But that is to underscore the point that you need to educate folks on what this all means.
Oh, wow.
I remember Mr. Truman Bodden telling me, when I was asking him persistently in mid-1997, when he was waiting for the opportunity to lodge the amendments to the development plan that had already been finished from about June or July. And I said, what's the hold up, Mr. Bodden? He said, oh, well, when we did these things initially, we had to have a warship in harbor because folks were threatening to riot. And I said, well, I think we moved on from that point. Turns out we were just waiting for a political opportunity to table the amendments, and that to his credit, that benefited us because we got those amendments through.
Correct.
without any holdups, without any challenge from anyone, because folks were distracted with other things.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, the first Cayman Bank debacle, and
Yes.
that's just pure political engineering. But I watched that all and said, well, maybe this is what we have to do to get, quote unquote, controversial legislation passed. I'm not saying that to encourage the current
Oh
government
my God.
to engineer something of that nature, but it is what it is, and it worked then. But I would hope that
I
by
think
now
we're a little bit
we
more
would
in
be,
tuned.
we are a mature enough and sophisticated enough
Yeah.
jurisdiction to understand that we need to progress these things.
Yeah.
What we need to bear in mind, and this is something that this is sort of my own thinking on it.
Mm-hmm.
What guaranteed us the success we've seen in the past is simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
We had relatively straightforward legislation. It wasn't mired in all sorts of minute detail, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a different world now. We can't go back to that. But we need to be careful that in trying to provide for every eventuality, we don't bury the sort of the ideology in the minutia. And folks sit there, spend days trying to figure out what does this all mean, right? And you get challenges by lawyers. They're particularly mischievous individuals when it comes to interpreting laws, as you know. And then you have to have knee-jerk legislation promulgated, which then complicates the problem, because usually what happens then is it creates knock-on effects in the existing legislative framework that nobody foresaw. And it makes for a field day for litigation, but it doesn't help the country. So we need to take a high-level approach. We need a group of sensible, dedicated folks just to figure out as quickly as possible what it is we need to do to enhance this blueprint of life. That's what we need to do. And we need to draw into it all quarters, all elements, including environmental, because we have had this sort of dysfunctional, I'm sorry, that's not how I see it, relationship. I think I'm justified in saying that when we have one department of government suing another, that's definitely evidence of a dysfunctional relationship. I believe it has progressed. I hope it has. I see it working a little better now, but it's all because everybody wanted to basically have their considerations made primary.
Prioritizing.
There's an easy solution. We should be by now, like I said earlier, mature enough that we can sit down and say, how do we all work together? How do we intermesh these legislative frameworks so that they work together? Not
something is better than nothing.
One having veto power over the other.
Correct.
No one civil servant or no one entity having absolute domain in making decisions, unless that entity is a statutory authority that has properly has vested in it all of the legislative tools it needs to make a fully informed decision. And going back to what I said earlier, that decision needs to, at the end of the day, at a high level, consider what's in the best interest of the people of the country.
Of the people. Yeah.
That's where we should start.
We got a caller. We have a caller. Good evening, caller. And this is because people listen to what you're sharing. They may have questions. So, and it's good for us because then we'll get to see, of course, how they're thinking, how we're coming across, because we may actually have to tweak. And this is why I'm loving these forums and the topics that we're bringing, because people are learning a lot right here. Good evening, caller. You're live on Sabrina Speaks.
Good evening, Sabrina. Good evening, Mr. Jackson.
Good evening.
Mr. Jackson, I have 3 questions for you. They sort of piggyback on each other. So if you'll indulge me, right?
Sure.
The topic of this show is balancing growth and green and growth, right? When you say balancing growth and green, what does that mean in practice when big projects are on the line? That's my first question.
You want me to answer that now, or you're You said one piggyback the other. What does that
Oh,
mean?
all right.
I can answer it. I can answer it right now.
Sure.
It means you have to take into consideration the environmental impacts of every project, right? And you whilst you might not be able to, every development, certainly physical development, because development can include just land use, but every physical development that manifests itself in terms of a rather large structure will have an adverse environmental impact. That's without question on the site. But if we're going to focus myopically on each site, then we're not going to be able to build anything. What we should be doing, and what has been done in the past, is looking at how do you offset that. I mean, the big sophisticated countries in Europe do that. They have carbon offsets and all sorts of elaborate things. I wouldn't suggest going down that road. But a simpler model could be, well, if you want to build something of this nature that has this impact, and you have to find a way to evaluate what that impact is, and it has to be rational and reasonable and proportionate, then you need to contribute to something else, right? That benefits the environment. So it's a true offset, not a tax. Although you can have that if you have a regime set up, for example, a environmental fund or national parks fund or something of that nature, which I intend to talk about if I get a chance later on in the show. National parks, that is. Yeah. But there are ways to do it, but that's the way you, to my mind, that's the only way you can balance it, because you cannot mandate someone to build a building out of a certain material or unreasonably constrain the development potential of their land when you have a parliamentary approved development plan that says this, for example, is zoned for hotel tourism, and you say no, the CPS says no, we don't want it for hotel tourism. We would prefer if it's left for agriculture. That would be an easy appeal to win, on the simple basis that it's Parliament who's vested with the authority to create the zoning, which dictates the presumption in favor of a certain type of development. And if the CPA is going to try to override that, then they're going to be acting unlawfully, because they don't have that authority. Their job is to weigh up all of the factors that the statute vests in them to consider, and at the end of the day make a decision. In other words, they have discretion, but it's not unfettered discretion. They have to be guided by the policy in the plan statement and the legislative provisions. So that's
it sounds to me like you sort of answered, going on to my second question. It sounds like you would support a rule that no development goes forward unless it meets clear targets, right?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Repeat.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, but repeat. He didn't hear the last part about what it supports. Repeat this.
No, I was asking. I said to him, it sounds like he supports a rule that no development goes forward unless it meets clear targets, like mangrove protection, reef health, flood control. If developers should fail, you mentioned EIAs, right? If developers should fail, should they lose a bond or have the project paused so that the public isn't left paying the price?
Well, you're asking if developers should have to pay a bond. Now, first of all, it's not my job to develop government policy, and whether I favor something or not matters not. I can only tell you what my opinion is in regards to the existing framework. There is good argument that we should have some sort of bond system, because there is always the threat of a white elephant. That's the first sort of the primary concern that drives a jurisdiction to create a development bond thing. I can tell you that I've talked to clients who said they would be happy to pay a development bond. If they got in exchange for that, they got a guarantee that their BCU evaluations, their inspections, etc., would be done in a timely manner. That's where we've gotten to. And we shouldn't look at it that we have to penalize developers.
Yeah,
developers are developing land in accordance with the laws set out in our framework that we promulgated through parliamentary process or some delegated authority to cabinet, for example. So this notion that's being promoted that developers just get free rein, I can tell you for a fact that is an absolute myth. Some developers might have a better go at it because they get the right advice up front. They find a way to offset whatever it is they're asking for with something else. I can't speak to every development, but I know that there's no free for all, and that's a notion that's been promoted, in recent years, that certain developers can get whatever they want.
That's the perception out here, at least.
If that, well, some of them did. I can tell you in the last 5 years or so, it's a bit different than it was before. And this will sort of segue into a whole different topic about, the wrong approach to real estate investment, which is when somebody walks off a flight here with a bag of money, purportedly with a bag of money to invest in real estate. They go to the government. This has happened in the past, and they get an LCCL for their own construction company. They get an LCCL for their own real estate company, and by the time it's done, they basically can own, manage, build everything, do their own project, bring in foreign labor, and you're left at the end of it thinking, what's the benefit to Cayman in this development? That's a valid question in that kind of environment. That's not something that I think, just certainly from an economic standpoint, as a citizen of this country, that I think is sustainable in any sense of the word. So, but there are legitimate developers that have to, certainly in recent years they've had to meet the requirements. Do I know whether they're shortcuts? I don't know. I suspect there will be from time to time, but that exists everywhere, I suppose.
But then how do you, how do you keep those developers accountable? Because if there's no free for all, right, as you just said, how do you explain projects that clear mangroves before approvals, for example, for EIAs that get sidelined?
Well, we have a robust regime for that now, which I have to tell you, I personally find questionable in its legitimacy. I'm referring to the 2021 mangrove order that was passed very quickly before the 2021 election. I don't want to speak to that because I think that might end up being a subject of litigation at some point. But I can tell you that there are measures, in terms of sanction, even criminal penal sanction, under the existing legislative framework for those who breach the law. And if they apply, and we've had clients who had to apply for after the fact permission for clearing, the law prescribes a penalty, and that they pay 10 times the planning fee. We put that in place in 2010. And that has worked, and that's basically an administrative penalty for doing something which normally they'd be entitled to do, but they did it without permission. And a lot of them complain because they don't get approvals in a timely manner. Whether that's justification for doing it or not, that's not for me to say. I don't think so. I think they should follow the law, but unfortunately, we are lagging in terms of the process of planning applications, largely because we have mostly, I would call it, a volunteer board system. And this does not just apply to planning, this applies to many boards. We have boards where folks have other jobs, real jobs, full-time jobs, and they have to show up once a month or twice a month and make very, very important decisions for a little stipend. They are not going to be able to, even if they wanted to, with the best will in the world, going to be able to give that task, right, the kind of attention and detailed consideration that they ought to. I've had arguments with the CPA members where they try to time us and say, well, you only have 10 minutes to speak, Mr. Jackson. I said, well, it's a $100 million project. Do you really think that's justifiable? You should be asking me 100,000 questions that would take you hours to answer, right? And then their reply typically will be something along the lines of, yeah, because you want to get paid. Like I don't. That's not how I work. But the truth of the matter is, if you're going to do this properly, you're going to have to take time. In order to take time, you're going to need people who have the time to commit to the task and the expertise. And we struggle with that. That's the truth. And I'm not afraid to offend anyone by saying that. If they're offended, then not too bad. We really need to move away from these volunteer boards. We needed to do that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and we haven't. And as someone who sat on many boards, I have felt the struggle, and I can tell you, the good board members, they spend a tremendous amount of time that they'll never get compensated for doing thankless work that they all get criticized for, because it's like any public service, but they don't get a real salary. And maybe we need to look at all of that, and make it, if we made
different show. Because it's a lot of work.
If we made the process simpler, then they would have less work to do. But we are convoluting the process in some ways, and I'll address that by creating policy outside the legislative framework, because we often hear that the planning department has this policy and this department has that policy, and we often wonder, where does that come from? I recently said to someone, this island seems to be suffering from policyitis, because every government department wakes up, every other day with a new policy that they want to promulgate. And I'm sorry, that's not a country that is abiding by the rule of law. Civil servants don't get to make up policy. That's the core function of government, to make up, to create policy, to inform legislation, and then impose it on the public and the people they put in charge of managing the public, regulating industry, whatever. That's how it should work in an ideal world. And if we did that, a lot of these concerns, and we did it in an open, transparent manner, a lot of these concerns that folks have, right? Because if they don't know, they don't know. And if they don't know, they're going to speculate, right? We need to work on all that. I mean, we've made steps in the right direction. Now, CPA hearings are made public, at least the presentation part, where the parties go in and they're making representations. That's people can go in, but when the CPA deliberates, obviously, like every other statutory authority, they do that in camera, behind closed doors. But they're required by the rule of law to promulgate a decision and then explain that decision by clear, intelligible reasons. That's been the rule of law for a long time. It's caught many a statutory authority flat-footed. So all of that to say, if we put the right people on these boards, not to say that we haven't done that, just to say we continue that, but we recognize that we need folks to be remunerated properly for the task at hand. These, like the CPA, for example, performs one of the most important government tasks there is. But they meet every other week, and they show up, and they have a massive agenda with lots of documents. I put my hand up and say I'm guilty for creating a lot of them. They always give me hell about that.
After you,
but because we try to address all the salient issues up front, so that people understand. Not only the clients we do the bound to do that on behalf of clients, so that they have the best representation possible, but also it goes a long way to helping folks understand what was considered. Right?
Caller, you think is he answering you, or are you following?
I'm having a bit of difficulty following, but Mr. Jackson, I just wanted to ask. I mean, you mentioned something about the penalty being 10 times the planning fee, right?
Yes.
And $100 million projects, right? What is that planning fee? Just off the bat.
What is the planning fee? There's multiple tiers of planning fees, and there's the planning application fee, for example, which is the one that's 10 times, is usually based on the square footage of a building, depending on what the nature of the building is. There's a whole schedule in the back of the planning regulations that spells that all out. I don't carry that around in my head.
Oh, but no, but what the reason I'm asking is because, right? I mean, if the penalty for something is for not following what they're supposed to do, and the penalty is 10 times that, right? I mean, for many people, wouldn't that just be just an overrun? I mean, how does it penalize them or stop them, or from breaking the rules?
But look, I don't know. That was Parliament's idea. You're asking, I believe, whether in all instances that is proportionate to the sort of offence committed, the breach of plan and control committed. Probably not. Its probably isn't proportionate in every instance. I can't see how it could be, but it's the metric they use to create an easy system for quantifying a penalty, which can be collected readily. The other option is to send them to court and let that work its way out. I don't think that's the answer.
Or performance bonds, right?
Well, a performance bond could I believe have those conditions, but we need the legislative framework to create that. And as I said earlier, I believe there are folks who would, in exchange for guarantees as to a fair, transparent, and expeditious process vis-a-vis
Willing to pay.
control, they would be willing to sign up to development bonds. It's got to be some sort of quid pro quo. They want to be able to, because the truth is, and this is beneficial to us, the last thing we want, remember now, the primary purpose, as I said earlier, of development bonds is to prevent white elephants. The last thing we want to do is start penalizing development and developers to the point where they just throw their hands up and say, I can't survive in this environment. I'm leaving, and leave a big hunk of a building half built behind.
It's unfinished.
People, contractors unpaid.
Mm-hmm.
The bank got to foreclose, and that is literally what we need to avoid. So, yeah, it's all fine and well to think that, well, these evil developers need to be penalized, and there's some merit in that. When there's a serious breach of plan and control, but if it's not that egregious a breach, and Parliament has said it's a 10-time fee, then I have to say, well, who is it for me to question that? That's what Parliament decided to implement. I don't know if it's proportionate in every case, but in some instances, clearing of land, and part of it is sort of part of the problem why there's so much outcry is because of all of the emotion that has been injected into clearing of mangroves. That is not to say mangroves aren't important. They've been protected by our development plan since 1977, although we called it Storm Belt back then. We changed it to mangrove buffer, gave it a more robust definition in 1997 when we did the major amendments to the development plan, and that's the fringing mangroves. But to try to protect all mangroves, including all mangroves sitting on privately owned land that's zoned for development, is antithetical to the development plan itself. And it's an offense under the Constitution, because people have a legitimate expectation to develop land as they see fit, and enjoy their right to land without interference by the government, unless it's for the legitimate cause and where they're paid adequate compensation. Now, maybe this is the time to segue into this idea of, or this discussion about, do we need national level protection of particular species no matter where they lie, or do we need to be a little more proactive about it and identify areas that need protection? National parks. Now, we've had provision for national parks since 1977. If you look in the old 77 plan, I just looked at it. There's provision there for national parks. We enhanced that a little bit.
Just let me make sure that the caller is finished.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Caller?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much. I'm listening to Mr. Jackson. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Just go
ahead.
Sorry,
I didn't mean to run on, but Sabrina, it's difficult to have a discussion about these things because the problem is we can't look at these things all in isolation. That's a big part of the problem that we struggle with today. Everybody wants to look sort of myopically at their bandwidth. This is what we're about. That's what they're about. But the truth is, we're all in it together. It's a tiny little island. We're all stuck in it. And if we're not going to work together at that level, we're going to destroy our country.
Yeah, but for context now, to keep people in tune with where we're going with the subject matter, but just keeping it all together. For those, I know we were having some little glitches there with some of the streaming. You mentioned at the beginning that Kim, our sister islands, doesn't have any zoning. There's no zoning over there in the sister islands. What does that mean? Understanding that it was a simple oversight. You did mention that there's a lack thereof, or that would take political will in order to have the sister islands aligned. But what does that really mean when you say there's no zoning? I own a home there. With the law over there not having any zoning, and let's say I wanted to put a shop in the front because I have the land space available, would I then be able to do it without any pushback at this time because it's not zoned residential versus commercial, low density, high density? Pretty much, Kim and Brack, you can put whatever you want where you want it because there's no zoning law for over there. Am I right or wrong with that question?
You're absolutely right. Not only is there no defined zoning, no defined land use vis-a-vis zoning, but because we have tied things like the notification of adjacent landowners to zoning, we have discovered we've made this point before, but we're making it again in a matter we're dealing with right now, that not only there's a whole raft of provisions in the regulations, regulation 7 to 34, I believe, that regulation 35 says does not apply to the sister islands unless it is extended by an order in cabinet. And as far as I know, that order has never been given. And then things like the notification process itself, section 15.4, that specifically applies to the authority, but does not apply to the DCB. The DCB is the Development Control Board that has the domain over the sister islands. So that the consequence of that is, strictly legally speaking, you don't even need to serve. Developers are not required to serve notices in the sister islands.
To
the
neighbors. Oh wow!
So it's one of those anomalies that pop up when you're not consistent.
Right. But now that this is in the public's domain and we know, what happens to somebody now free? I mean, this is just for information and discussion purposes because you've highlighted something rather important here. What does that mean then if somebody wants to, understanding what we've just discovered here, want to put in something today, tomorrow, then could it be a case where they're being held back because this is now brought to light?
Well, it means the government needs to readily pass the order that they need to extend whichever those provisions that have been accepted, that the sister islands have been exempted from, to extend it to the sister islands. There's a simple solution to that too.
Would that be a simple cabinet paper with this order, as you alluded to? Does it have to be debated on the floor of Parliament? I mean, there should be going in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, the problem is the development and planning regulations, except for a short period of time, which was a foolhardy political exercise or enterprise. For a short period of time, they didn't need to go to Parliament, but from their inception, except for a small interruption about 2 or 3 years, all regulations passed under the Development Planning Act, unlike every other regulation I can think about in the country, has to be tabled in Parliament. They did that. I think if I recall correctly, I think Mr. Bodden also explained to me back then we had to do that because we wanted the people, the Caymanian people, voting public, wanted to make sure that that cabinet or exco of the day couldn't tinker with their rights vis-a-vis, changing regulations behind closed doors. And there's been some of that, but so to answer your question, it's going to take a bit more than would normally obtain with regards to regulations. They'd have to create them and then table them in the Parliament.
But as it stands right now, this can be a pro and a con for that jurisdiction. Right now, it is wide open. No belts and braces is what my takeaway. It's wide open. It's open season.
It is more or less. I mean, they're still subject to plan and control, and
Of course.
the DCB does have discretion they can exercise, and it can properly refuse planning applications if they think they're injurious to some material planning consideration, like a minute.
Lack thereof of teeth, legal teeth. It's worth somebody who has the money then to just go ahead and fight it. What are you going to do?
It actually cuts both ways. It makes it difficult to challenge them too, because they have unfettered discretion, right?
Right.
So they have the ability to make it, as long as their decision is rational and proportionate and procedurally fair,
Right.
then it's going to be lawful, because they have, as I alluded to earlier, carte blanche. Not really, but they're not constrained by the regulations that apply to zoning, right? So and whereas you in Grand Cayman, you'd say, well, we've complied with all the rules that are specified in the regulations for the zone, and therefore we have a legitimate expectation to get an approval. Not that it works exactly like that, but that's the argument that would be made. That would be given some credence to. That don't work in the sister islands, because they're gonna say, well, we don't actually have zoning. We ought to look at this holistically and just determine whether this is beneficial.
Oh wow!
To the particular island.
There could be tug of war and just this constant tension from both sides, and nobody gets anywhere. So yeah, what do you say? Solution: just get it done.
Yeah, well, it isn't easy, and it's not going to be popular, and it will take a lot of people off. So it will take some political will, and then some, but it needs to be done.
They always say, with what little experience that I have, but it makes sense now looking on from the other side, defense, difficult things like this is best done in at least the first half, so you can redeem yourself by the second half. Would you agree? From being in a political seat, you want to tackle the most challenging things at the beginning, but with proper dialogue. And I mean, what you have shared here, as Miss Ethel Fellner says, very informative. And I mean, this has brought light to a lot of things, but it could benefit, and it could be a huge disadvantage for persons who have investments over there as well. So like you rightfully say, it's a two-edged sword.
I can show you, Sabrina. When we in 2009 or thereabouts, the then government set up a development plan. Sorry, a planning law and regulations committee was what it was initially called, but we looked at development plan to some extent, although that's the domain of the CPA.
Yeah.
But the purpose of that was to identify, review the existing planning law and regulations, identify what needed to be enhanced, etc. And it wasn't that we were given specific terms of reference or that it was policy driven. It was a bunch of professionals. The late great Burns Conley was the chairman. I was a legal advisor. We had a complete cross section of the development community sitting around the table at least once a month, and we had lots of ideas, and we had some fierce debate and some very constructive discussion, and we wrote a report. And that only was utilized to some extent, along with with the height increase in 2010.
Right.
Some of those provisions were utilized. The rest of it sat somewhere gathering dust. I wouldn't even know where to find it. But what I do have is my folder, which I can show you. Which this is a document. This is a set of documents that the CPA uses. Right. It's called the Strategic Plan for Review of the 1997 Development Plan, and it has, landscaping guidelines, wall and fence guidelines, stormwater management guidelines, industrial design guidelines, sign, a whole litany of things that should be in the development plan. Like it's date stamp 2007. This has been around for a while, right? I presume that it's been enhanced. There was all these efforts and initiatives, labeled as Plan Cayman. I'm hoping that all of this time and effort that's been expended will result in something coming to fruition that will enhance, because we've just kicked this can down the road too far now.
Yeah. Well, I'm really hoping something comes to fruition because, like rightfully say, and this is no cop out. This is just being brutally honest. From 2021 to the administration to just to 2025, pretty much 2 years of that was just shrouded in COVID and reopening. That was that was the position of the world. So to say, you know, we have to just not take that. I think people forget that we pretty much were at a standstill for 2 years. That's the former administration. And not because I was there, it is just a fact. So now all of these things that are coming to light because we've gone back, we've started back life, we're living with COVID despite it still being very rampant. How can we rehash these things? You're going through all of that, something that's so far back that has been discussion. What will it take? I know you're saying political will, but do you feel persons like yourself as having forums like this and bringing in bite-sized pieces for people to really understand where we are and how important it is for us to constantly update these pieces of legislation, even if you do it in bite-sized pieces? It's not this thing of trying to do a whole piece of legislation may take forever and we get nowhere while we continue to evolve, people continue to do business, or in some cases we can hold ourselves back or open ourselves up for litigation.
Yep.
For someone in the field, do you think it's best for us to just, let's say, take 3 top things then and just work on it until we eventually bite away at all of it instead of just trying to eat everything one scene time?
Yes and no. If we have like the blueprint figured out and we just sort of phase in parts of it, yes. The problem is if you do things piecemeal, you're just doing what we've been doing. That's business as usual, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we've been doing for a long time. We wait until a problem crops up, we make an amendment, and then when that has a consequential effect, we make another amendment, and another amendment.
Which is what we're saying, ad hoc, based on just putting a Band-Aid over things.
Which defeats the purpose of law. The purpose of law is all about certainty, so that folks know what their rights are. That's why we write laws. But if we're gonna keep tinkering with them every time someone needs something because someone else overlooked it, or someone pared it out of the legislation previously, which has happened, then we are going to consign ourselves to committing the same mistake over and over again. What is the old saying? Only a madman does the same thing over and over again.
Over and over again. Expect there's different results.
We'll be having this conversation 10 years from now. Well, I won't be. Hopefully, I'll be retired. Probably somewhere where I can afford to live. But
it's going to irk you. It's going to irk the life out of you because, as one commenter said, James Harvey, who actually said the sister islands are included in the proposed updated plan Cayman, quote unquote. And then he further said, notice these are all guidelines and not laws, shaking my head. But that's what we're trying to get to. We, and I guess actually said it takes political will. So from when does it get from guidelines to actually law is what we're trying to ventilate here and put in the public's domain.
Well, we have 3 rungs of in this legislative framework that applies to planning Cayman. We have basically 3 rungs of legislation. The primary legislation, which is the Development Planning Act, right? That's the primary legislation passed by Parliament. And that informs and authorizes everything that needs to be done under that legislation, including the promulgation of a development plan, which we did back in 1977 and amended a number of times since, but primarily in 1997. And the regulations. So the 3 things are the act, the regulations, and the development plan. The regulations have the force of law, and they're prescriptive. And by that I mean they're very definitive. They say things like setback should be X number of feet for the zone, that sort of stuff. But the zone, the planning statement is a guideline, but it is the CPA is required to adhere to it, because Section 5 of the legislation says and has said from its inception, it is the duty of the authority to secure consistency and continuity in the framing of a comprehensive policy approved by Cabinet, right, in accordance with the development plan being the zoning map. That statement, that's basically the birthplace of the planning statement. So it is yet it doesn't have the force of law, and it shouldn't, because it's couched in general terms, policy language. But the CPA can't ignore it. So when it says things like the CPA should maximize the utility in land, that means whenever the CPA does something that someone thinks does not conform to that initiative, they can challenge the CPA on that basis. Because guess why? Because one of the grounds of appeal under the Planning Act is that the CPA's decision is at a variance with the development plan. So the effect of that is that the policy statement, albeit couched in general policy language, does have the force of law.
Okay.
Now, it might seem like an esoteric exercise. When you go up to the PAT, you got to ask the Planning Appeals Tribunal, did the CPA, it is our position that the CPA acted at a variance. Sometimes it's hard to discern, hard to prove, hard to satisfy them, but it's there. It literally, I mean, and if you, it's a bit difficult, right? And I understand. I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, Sabrina, but it's not as simple.
It's hard to break it down in this context, because as you rightfully alluded to, for years we have just been doing piecework. It's almost like, a road needs to be just fully hot mixed, but yet you continue to patch holes. And that's what it appears we've been doing for far too long.
Oh, well, don't get me started on that regime. The planning regime is one thing. The NRA is a complete
another. No, I just use that bad. And oh God,
don't use that analogy. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole this evening.
I don't want to trigger you.
Suffice it to say, there are at least the CPA have their standards prescribed, largely by the development plan.
Right.
And yes, they do have some policy guidelines that might not have the force of law, and might be subject to challenge at some point. But the NRA, they're pretty blatant. They and the CPA falls into the same trap, because they will tell you when you're paving a road, you need to pave it to NRA standards. My immediate questions are always, what standards? They don't have any standards. They adopt whatever standard they want from the US. I didn't know we were an extension of the US jurisdiction. So that's part of the problem. When I said earlier, we need to make sure that everybody's on board.
Yeah.
All of those things are planks in the sort of the planning control regime. All of them: water authority, planning, environment. Everybody need to work in unison, right? And we achieve that now by a consultative process. The CPA, when making a plan decision, they consult with these entities and they get their opinions, etc. But the problem is, there's times when the CPA approaches that as gospel. I've heard clients say, "Oh well, the NRA didn't approve my roadway," and I said, "Hang on a minute. No, the NRA don't approve or disapprove this is a private roadway. They have domain over the public roads as directed by cabinet, but they don't have domain over your private road. The CPA does, but the CPA treats it as if this NRA says it's gospel. You need to do it."
Wow.
And that is further complicated by all these other things like imposing foreign standards.
Right.
It's a myriad of issues that we need to address.
You know what I'm getting from this? No, but you know what I'm getting from this, for someone who isn't intimately involved or pretty much working with it as you are, that people are just looking at planning under one piece of legislation, possibly, and they're mixing up, let's say, 3 or 4 different legislation and just speaking about it in one conversation, when what you are trying to describe, which is hard for some people to follow, is because we're speaking with separate laws that actually you got one board dealing with so much other bits of legislation. Am I getting this right?
You are, and to the point where we have a provision in the Development Planning Act that says where there's a conflict arising between the CPA and any of the entities vis-a-vis these, and it lists all the legislation, right? Including the National Conservation Act. The matter should be referred to cabinet for resolution. Unfortunately, that didn't happen before. Despite certain efforts being made, that did not happen for whatever reason. I don't want to speculate or castigate anybody, but it should have happened, because that is exactly how a responsible government would approach it. Because if you have two government entities fighting, the least you should do as a government is mediate, right? Especially where the law imposes a duty on you as cabinet to do so. So, but the bigger point is, we have recognized long ago that not only do we need to engage in a consultative process with other principals, other agencies who have as their principal function certain specific things they have specific expertise for, roads, fire, etc. We need to consult with them. CPA needs to consult with them to make sure they're making a fully informed decision. They don't approve something that causes a fire hazard or a problem with road access or whatever. And we have gone as far as to provide the regime where the process where you can disputes between those entities can be resolved. And I say that to say this: it's bad enough having inadequate legislation, but it's made even worse. The problem is compounded when you have legislation or legislative provisions which you don't follow for whatever reason.
Oh wow!
That's far worse, because it beggars the question: why bother to pass legislation if government never follow it itself?
Exactly.
What kind of example are they setting for the public?
Yeah, but it's a bigger thing from what I'm getting now. Listening to you and just breaking it down, you actually have to speak about each legislation in isolation and then tie it back to the duties of the board for people then to take away the message and why they're all interconnected. Because maybe it may come to a point that you have there are independent legislation, but almost like there's subsections that ties it in. I'm trying to paint an image here so people can understand as much as possible, because you have one board that is working with, let's say, just for numbers' sake, for this purpose, 3 separate pieces of legislation that could impact one development. But yet it's 3 separate laws, not including, but it is inclusive, environment. And they're like 3 or 4 separate pieces of legislation that one board is actually trying to make a decision on and creating a balance in the best interest of sustainable development, meeting the wills of the people, and everything else that goes into that. And for people to wrap their heads around this instead of just honestly looking at one, that is going to take some serious education.
Yep. But to make it as simplistic as I can, what we need is a more wholesale approach, a more fulsome approach to plan and control. By that I mean, let's take the convenient example of environment. There's no need to have a separate environmental regime. I have always thought that it was important, and yes, I acknowledge, that there have been failures on the part of the planning regime to take into account environment. The planning statement has always said that is something that the CPA has to take into account. And there have been instances in the past where people were legitimately aggrieved that wasn't taken into account, right? I know, because I might have been involved in some of those decisions. I have a mandate when a client hires me to do what the best I can do for them within the legislative framework.
One thing with you, I must say, confession, good for the soul with you.
No, but that's no confession. That's me simply alluding to the fact that I have to do a job. When I'm hired to do a job, I have to do it to the best of my professional ability.
Right.
Do I as a citizen enjoy it? No, probably not. Not a lot of the times I don't enjoy it, but I'm still bound to do it, right? And it's like the surgeon operating on a murderer.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do I kill him? I can't, right? So we need to have a more focused but broader approach to plan and control that brings all of these things under and
one.
The consultative process does work to some extent, but not when there are veto powers and there's power struggles going on internally, and because a lot of times things like ego get in the way.
Oh Lord.
About it. And
bold and italic.
This is my domain. I'm the expert in this field. How dare they? And after all, my considerations are more important than their considerations, and the other side just say the same thing.
Yeah.
If government doesn't guide that with sort of centralized legislation that brings that all under one umbrella, right? then we're going to continue down this road of having conflicts between government entities.
But that's hoping that government themselves, and I'm just speaking broad brush, understand it. And the only how for clarity and careful understanding is just getting like-minded persons like yourself, experts around a table, and you just be candid. Can you break this down? Because how can you have meaningful policies that will one day translate into law or a directive from a cabinet unless you're understanding of what you're doing? And the only how you can do that is honestly get the right people around the table, and don't be ashamed of saying, I don't get it, but we know the way we're going right now is not working. And you just have to trust, hoping that the persons around that table that you're taking guidance from doesn't have any hidden agendas either. And public participation, Sammy.
Well, do it in a transparent manner where you're right. You have public engagement, so that the public can assess for themselves whether the process that government has deployed is working in their best interest. You know, and like I said earlier, if they don't know, they're gonna speculate.
Correct.
And you know, the human mind tends to err on the side of caution, so they're going to be cautious, to say the least.
Right. Not because you're an MP that it means, or you're a minister, that it means you are an expert. And I feel that a very good leader, especially in those roles, is one who is informed and have a trusted group of people behind them, and also surround themselves and be transparent that if you don't know, you're not, I don't feel any one of your voters would expect you to know everything.
No.
And for you to think that, exactly. And not because you are a minister for a specific ministry that has a responsibility, you know, of whatever, that you should be too, or think yourself too big, or you think people may look at you differently if you reach out to the right people. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Listen, I stuck my toe in a political pool. You know what the result was, but it was a learning experience for me as well. I think everybody should try that once in a while.
Which is why we're here.
Once in a lifetime, I should say. Because it is a really thankless job.
Tell me about it.
It takes years off your life every month. I don't covet anyone's position in government at all. I don't, you know, I did what I did for my own reasons.
Yeah.
And I learned from it.
Yeah.
But I realized that it is hard for a politician to operate in that environment where you need to please at least a majority of your electorate. Right?
And it works with single member constituency because you gotta balance. Now that's a balancing act all in itself.
And so what obtains or what finds favor in one constituency,
is not the same.
The antithetical to another one. And so you're not going to be able to get the sort of unison you would need to have, right? That to get the job done.
Correct.
That's part of the problem in my humble opinion. But
having been there, I'm telling you, you hit the nail on the head. And then that's where the egos come in, because one then does not speak about their responsibility from a national perspective. They speak of their constituency and what are the needs of the persons that got them there. And
I can tell you, Sabrina, I was one of the strongest advocates. It felt like the lone voice in the wilderness at one point. I lost friends over advocating against one man, one vote. I understand the thinking behind one man, one vote. You have direct representation, but I looked at the bigger picture and said,
from a national perspective,
create all of these little micro constituencies where everybody's fighting amongst themselves. It lends itself to all sorts of political problems and issues.
Correct.
And we're, after all, one little village. That's all we are.
Exactly.
Brings us back to the topic at hand. If you got 73 square miles, the big island got 73 square miles or 76 or whatever it is. A lot of the developable land already being developed, developable land being developed, and the precious few development sites left. And we have a development plan that says we need to maximize utility of land. We're going to have to find that, and if it produces things like taller buildings and smaller footprints, then we're gonna have to live with that. We're gonna have to live with that, and we're gonna have to live with the reality that we just can't shut it down just because folks are kicked off. You know, that's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about balance and green. We can do that. I believe we
Right.
can do that. And national parks. Let's touch on that a bit.
Yes, please. Yes.
I can't for the life of me figure out why we don't have one single national park yet. We have a park and recreation unit. We have all of that. I'm as baffled by that as what I alluded to earlier in the previous occasion when I was on your show about why we don't have the beach protected. Why is the beach a protected area? 7 Mile Beach, for example, any of the beaches. Why haven't we not gone through that exercise? We did a little bit of it in '97 with scenic coastlines, but that didn't really mean much because we didn't really populate the regulations with sort of protection we should have, right? It says something general like it should protect the open vistas. And I remember objecting to a project. I do that too. I objected to a large project in West Bay where it was being built on scenic coastline. It was just a monolith. It went straight from one end of the parcel to the next. And I said, this is definitely in offense of that initiative. All of that to say, we need to find the right balance, right? And it's not in going, anytime you try, I always say the pendulum never swings to the middle. And the harder you try to force it in one direction, the harder it will rebound in another. And we'll never get balanced that way.
Right.
Right? We'll always be chasing that pendulum. And unless we figure that out, and I think the way to do it is, I'm not saying I believe we can establish this sort of thing on some kumbaya basis, everybody get around a campfire and hug up and do the hippie thing. I don't know if that'll ever work, but certainly we must be in agree. Even those of us who are, sort of vehemently opposed along political lines, got to at some point agree, look, we're all, whether we think their views are misguided or not, we're in this for the betterment of our country. Right. And let's sit down and listen to the other side a little bit and hear them out and have some consideration rather than labeling them. I remember when I tried to point out some of the flaws in the National Conservation Bill, and I got called a developers rep in a town hall meeting, and I said, I don't even know why I'm here. I said, I don't know why I'm here. I'm hearing this. Nobody's paying me to be here, and I must be a fool because the more complicated you all make the development regime, the more profit I can make from it.
Exactly, I remember
given the line
that.
of work I'm in, so I'm shooting myself in the foot, and then I get beat on the head on top of it.
Yeah.
Why am I here?
Yeah.
Right? So I just try and do, something for the betterment of the country, and I hope that at some point in time we can have all the relevant folks enjoy some dialogue, some discussion.
But moving forward,
we need we need more than talk. There's a lot of talk around, right? That's why I sort of bore people to death with drilling down into the minutia, because I'm like the nuts and bolts guy. I like fixing stuff. That's my thing.
I think they become bored because you're speaking from a point of understanding, and we just have to be able to dissect it in small bites, because I'm feeling, and just offline comments that I'm getting, people did not realize it until I broke it down, that you have one board dealing with multiple laws that are not in sync, that could affect one development, for example. That was just for example. And I think that for far too long in this space, only those persons who are, like I said, intimately involved, you've made your business from this, you can have a conversation, right? And with like-minded persons who are in it. But when you're impacting nationally and there's a wrong message that's out there or a wrong direction in conversation because people just don't understand it, is why we have to take a couple steps back, dissect it in bits and pieces so people will really understand. And I'm feeling that we have begun to scratch the surface here by, first of all, identifying that we know we need revision, we need it updated, but we also, in the same breath, need to be able to deal with one legislation pretty much at a time on discussion, even if behind the scenes we're working on all of them one same time, for the people to be more embracing, more palatable and understanding. It's going to take more of these discussions bit by bit, because you're not going to get the national buy-in if we're just not understanding it.
And there's another wrinkle, so to speak. Not that I want to complicate the matter, but one thing that we have sadly lacked since 2009 was amending our legislation to conform to the Constitution. We have laws that are in direct contravention of the Constitution. We have laws.
Section
We have
18.
created laws that are in direct contravention with other laws.
Yeah.
And even though they say this law shall prevail, everyone ignores it. We got to stop that, or we cannot acquit ourselves as being a country that conforms to the rule of law. We've got to stop this convenient construction, ignoring legislation, all of that, and in particular the Constitution. And so we have the ability, I believe, collectively. We have lots of competent folks on Ireland, people who would show up, but they don't want to be castigated. They don't want to be attacked. They don't want to be ridiculed, and they belong to these sort of groups, who promote certain ideologies in a vacuum. This is the thing that bothers me. I've seen a lot of it, and I'm thinking, I get where they're coming from. I understand why they feel so violently about what they're protesting about, but they don't get the context. They don't understand there's more to it than that. It's not just your consideration. There's a whole lot of other considerations that need to be taken into account. And if we start, you mentioned amending legislation. Maybe we need to start with that layer, like figure out how we make legislation constitutionally compliant, and in that process we start amending the planning framework, and we take a holistic approach. We look at all the attendant legislation that it has to plug into, and we figure out a way to make them mesh with this. And what we need to understand is we can't have public servants, right, promulgating policies or promulgating law.
Put that in layman's lingo.
Well,
what is a public servant? I'm being devil's advocate, Sammy.
A public servant is someone in the employ of government, or a public authority, or a statutory authority, or a government-owned company. Right?
And you can't have them making policy. Who's responsible for making policy?
Government itself.
But who does the background for it?
Well, they can develop draft policy, but it needs to be approved by cabinet, right? And we have a lot of that. I can give you an example. We have guidance notes issued by a working committee of the NCC that have been forced upon us as if they have the force of law. Now, we had a debate about that at the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal basically came back and said, no, they don't have the force of law, but because they have, technical value, they're based on expertise, then the CPA has to take them into account. But and I believe that's born of necessity. I think that's because the politicians they haven't taken up the mantle and done what they're supposed to do in the past. They've promulgated, passed legislation in framework, the primary legislation. They don't create regulations. They don't implement the initiatives like environmental funds or whatever. Those are just examples, right?
Right.
If you don't follow through, what's the point of passing the legislation? But
we got a caller.
Yep.
Good evening, caller. You're live.
Good evening.
Welcome to Sabrina Speaks. What's on your mind? Good night. Put on your seatbelt, Sammy.
Sammy, when Sabrina asked you who is responsible for making policy, you said government. And some people think that backbench members are government. Some people think that
core government.
If you work for government, like as in a civil servant, you're the government.
Government, the cabinet.
That's right. The ministers.
You see, this is why I like my students, because poor me, I'm in an awkward position. So thank you, caller.
But my question to you is this. if you were the governor and you had
That's a dangerous
people,
proposition.
well, no, actually, you might do a better job than the one that's there.
Be nice.
The no, I'm about being real. She's responsible for good governance. And I'm listening to Mr. Jackson talk about things being done in an unlawful way.
Mm-hmm.
And she's responsible for good governance. And so I'm asking, if he was the governor, what would he do about the cabinet or the House making laws that are contrary to the Constitution that he would be asked to sign?
You refuse to give assent to it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
until it's compliant.
Okay. And then would you come to the public and explain your decision? Because politicians are gonna play with that.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can hear me.
If you have in a world where I occupy a high station like that and I wield that kind of authority, yes, definitely, I would explain every action I take. That's why I probably will never occupy that station, because I don't have the patience to do all of that. To be honest with you, but yeah, in an ideal world, that's what should happen. If you're giving credence to transparency and good governance and all those things that the Constitution speaks to, that's what's required. And you gotta trust in institutions like the ombudsman to do their job properly, because they have, and when they make decisions that are inconvenient to whatever, you need to make sure that if you are on the right side of whatever decision is made, whatever
Right.
finding is made, because they don't make decisions in terms of it being binding like a judgment. But all of that to say, I believe that we need sort of a better understanding of what's wrong at the high level, and it may very well be a lack of understanding. Maybe
Goes
perhaps
back to what I said earlier on.
perhaps by not making inquiries from listening to one side rather than another. I might or might not be referring to something specific, but that I think that is what is required, right?
Well, I'd like to refer to something very specific here on this point, because someone who calls the show quite often attempted to have the civil service, the upper levels of civil service, to be educated in administrative law, because he found that many of the issues that was coming before him could have been avoided if they had a better understanding of administrative law. And he was denied the opportunity to educate them in that way.
Yeah.
And that denial, where that came from, was the Attorney General himself. And that, to me, I find that shocking. That's unacceptable. Because if anybody who would understand the importance of having the responsibility of a management position in the civil service would know the liability that would flow from being not equipped to deal with issues. So, I mean, the problem is that there's not a lot of concern about getting this done. I mean, I'm having a situation right now where someone in Parliament is telling me they're not going to comply with Section 19.2 of the Constitution. This is in the Parliament.
I mean, give you written reasons for a decision.
That's right. That absolutely refuse. They say they're not going to answer me. Now, that is not the rule of law.
You have to take out a Section 21 petition against them then? Maybe I'll have the requisite salutary effect. I don't know.
I've taken the matter to the person's supervisor. So they'll have to deal with it from there.
Yeah, but to speak to what you shared earlier, that doesn't surprise me. I think a lot of what goes on in government now is people become entrenched. They have their own sort of perceived domains, and they don't want anybody usurping their function. But any education is better than none, unless it's really bad education.
Right.
But if it's the person I suspect it is, the person you're speaking about, as far as I know, I'm aware, based on what I've heard, they're very well versed in administrative law. And I think the entirety of government could do with a little bit of a lesson in that regard. Right?
Especially the police too.
The police for sure.
Okay. Go ahead, Danny.
Yes, I was just saying, especially the police as well, because
Definitely.
a lot of the instances there fall directly in that area of law.
Yep. And then they may also learn not to use that civil what is it, the typical excuse that I keep hearing from clients. They say it's a civil matter. Yes, it is. So
Yeah.
if I steal from you, then you have both a cause of action against me personally in the civil courts, but you should also be allowed to call the police and report me for the act of theft, which is a separate criminal offense governed by the fact that you have a civil remedy against me does not at all mitigate my criminality, my culpability. I baffle over that all the time. But again, if this practice pervades and prevails, then and there's no consequence, then that's what we're going to get, and we get lazy policing. Just saying, I'm not accusing anyone here. That's a normal, natural consequence of that sort of mindset. If you are allowed to basically say, well, it's not, you have another avenue of redress, go have at that. Go hire a lawyer, because that's so easy and cheap to do. Take it down to court and wait 2 years, get a decision.
Well, there are two things that come to mind as I'm listening to you, and one is that we need the public to have a better understanding of what their rights are when interacting with government. And then secondly, why perhaps you might be a good candidate for governor.
How the heck is that possible? You really filling the space, Danny.
No, Danny. I don't have the geographical qualifications.
Exactly. Coming from him, I would not have expected that, but I see the joke in it. I see the humor. I see the humor in it.
All right, take care.
Thank you for your contribution, caller.
Thanks.
Did you take away the humor from that?
Yeah, I did.
But, understanding that we're saying we're out of touch and aligning, pretty much not out of touch, but that a lot of the legislation do not coincide with our Constitution. Something like that is easy. That's not the Constitution. It's local politics that can actually make the two align. So that's not something that we can point the finger and say the UK has to change it to match this because this is what we want. The Constitution is there. We have just failed for whatever reason to make sure that our legislation aligns with what you could call the 10 Commandments for our jurisdiction. And
we have a law reform commission. We've had a law reform commission for many, many years, and it's usually populated with very competent lawyers who have done a tremendous amount of work. And I know about, I even spoke to this in the 2021 campaign, consumer protection, for example.
Right.
There's been legislation drafted for like 12 years at that time that we are 16 now. And for some reason, that isn't important. But we have lots of folks employed doing very important tasks that creating things that need to be recognized, to be authorized, to be promulgated into law, whatever. And we don't follow through. We don't finish it. Just finish the job. Things done in halves are never done. That's what my father used to tell me all the time. We got a litany of reports that are written, each one costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, lying on shelves all over the government building, gathering dust. Right? I know of some. And they never come to fruition. Or I shouldn't say they never come to fruition. A lot of times they never come to fruition. And it's just wastage. And you got to ask yourself why. But that's a whole level of problem we have there.
Exactly. But rightfully, like you said, there are lots of legislation there. There are things that could be put into law, but why they don't move? And I mean, I can recall back from my time, Pharmacy Act, the pharmacy law, an updated one is already approved. And where is it? And we're talking about one of the highest GDPs for cost of medical and medicines here in our
Well, the list
island.
goes on. We have an
I mean,
employment
come
law that
on.
was passed in 2005 that's never been activated.
There we
Remember
go. There we go.
We're still operating under the labor law, the labor act, we call it now. The labor law that was promulgated by, I believe, Mr. Norman. And then back in the day, I remember I did a stint in labor office when I was doing articles under the late, great Dale Banks. An awesome individual to work for.
Yes.
And he kept saying, you know, they passed this damn legislation, Sam, just so they have something to say, that they had something. But and it was woefully inadequate then, right? We're talking late 80s, early 90s. So we failed on a number of things. And I suspect that's special interest at play. You know, folks don't want to, they like the status quo. It's defined and easy to predict what will, you know, the outcome will be. New legislation brings new challenges, etc.
Correct. Do you think forums like this and conversations, open conversations, not being disrespectful, we're educating and informing, will have persons probably more in tune to when Parliament's in session to really understand the processes of what happens when there's a bill or a piece of law for amendment or a whole piece of legislation goes to the floor of Parliament, being debated, what happens when it passes, what are the next sections of it? Do you feel then something that is passed in Parliament, assented to by the governor, but not yet enacted, that the more we actually openly discuss these things respectfully, that people would then hold their representatives accountable for bringing them over the finish line? Because how much are just pretty much hanging there?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I've even sat down to read that particular legislation I referred to thoroughly enough to say whether it's better than the current regime or not. I don't know. I just think it's sad if Parliament passes legislation, puts a delayed date on it, or leaves an open-ended date on it, right? So that it has to be activated at a certain time by a subsequent act of Parliament, and it just sits there.
But if people don't understand it, Sammy, which is why I put that into full perspective.
Yeah, I get
because as a first
agree.
timer, I'm going to be honest with you. I did not realize that, how long it takes. And you're doing your people a disservice when they do not understand. And this is why we have to educate the populace.
Yeah. So, well, hopefully someone will be held accountable, and that will motivate them to do what needs to be done at some level. To answer your question, yeah, the more conversations we have like this in the public domain, that's why I agreed to come on.
And I thank you. I thank all of my participants too. I mean, because it tells us where people's headspace are.
Yeah, you know, we all need to be willing to have the public discussion, take questions, be honest if you can't answer them, try to explain our rationale, you know, without getting upset that somebody else is challenging.
Taking it personal or that you're on a witch hunt.
It's not easy, you know. I fall foul of that myself. Like, I get frustrated sometimes that I have to answer the same question the 20th time. But we're all human, but I think we can get there. No, I think we strayed so far off the sort of the headline topic that we probably owe that a little bit of a discussion before.
We'll go. The whole 10 minutes is yours. We can go to 7. Thank God.
Well, back to the sustainable development thing. How do we do that and balance it? And we've sort of discussed it without discussing it specifically. All the stuff that we spoke to earlier about making the legislation mesh, that's the sustainable path. Sustainable economically, sustainable environmentally, sustainable from a planning perspective, infrastructurally. We need to make sure all these things work in lockstep, or at least intermesh with each other, because again, it's a small island. It's very easy for us to screw it up. We've done a pretty good job already. You know, just speaking from my personal perspective, I've always wondered about why we put 10-story buildings on the coastline and 3-story buildings. And just looking at the West Bay Peninsula, 3-story buildings on the inside, when we should have probably done the opposite. You know, phase it. There's lots of things, but there's no utility in discussing what has happened, because nobody's going to tear a building down just because we change the planning regime to build a new one that's compliant. That's going to have to govern things going forward. How do we achieve sustainability?
Right.
We look at environmental impact, we look at infrastructural impact, we look at economic impact, social impact. We look at all those things together, right? Do I know every bit and piece of what needs to be put in place to make that happen? No, I do not. I don't possess that breadth of knowledge. No one does, as far as I'm aware. Some may think they do, but I'm here to tell you they don't. Because it's a myriad of issues that need to be considered. But if we can create the framework for it, and then we can create a board with the requisite number of people with relevant experience and qualifications, etc., to consider these things, and perhaps remunerate them properly, motivate them to show up and do what others might expect them to do based on civic duty. I can tell you that only takes you so far. We all have to pay bills, and every year that goes by, the bills increase. So folks got to survive. If you want competent advice, you have to pay for it. If you want, competent participation at a board level, you're gonna have to pay for it. We're gonna have to move away from that. That's not to say that there won't be people who. I sat on a statutory board. I remember someone in one of the civil servants saying to me one day, "Oh, but your board is one of the highest paid boards." I said, "If I gave you a bill for the time I spent in the last month at my billable rate, you'd fall off your chair, right?" Just to say, if you want the right people on the board, right, you don't have to pay them their going rate. No one is, and that's not what I'm saying. But you got to make it worth their while, or else you're not going to achieve it. And people think that's that's neither here nor there. That good, we still get good people no matter what. I haven't seen it. I've sat on many boards, and especially since under the public authorities regime, Public Authorities Act regime, we've moved away from allowing civil servants to vote. Be counted as quorum, chair of board, etc. And that law says that applies to every other law, regardless whether it's in conflict or not. We haven't followed that either. We haven't even restructured. I spoke to that on our last occasion we were on air, because things like the CPA need to become a functioning statutory authority. Now, I've heard good things since our show. Actually, I'm hearing that we're moving in that direction.
Good.
That's good news. And I can tell you, we got a planning minister. That's the most proactive person I know.
He is.
Unashamedly plug for him. I know if it can be done,
He can do it.
He'll do it. So I'm hoping that all of that, at some point in time in the future, we can return to the show and say, "Look, Sabrina, looks like we're going in the right direction."
Oh, look. It's all about respect. And just like I said, we got to educate. If they want the support nationally, we got to educate our people.
Yeah, I remember, I shared this with you. I remember when I was troubled with, one of the things that Truman Bodden had me do was meet with Michael Bradley, who was a retired governor and retired attorney general, who was a law revision commissioner back in the day. He said, "You go down and meet with Michael and draft all the relevant provisions of the plan and regs that we need for these new zones." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I don't know what they're doing." I go see what this gentleman had. Sure enough, he was a highly competent fellow. And I'd come back with a provision, said, "Mr. Bodden, this is what we drafted." And he said, and I said, "But I'm worried about this and I'm worried about that," because I'd written it, right? He said, "Don't worry about that, my son. That was we never get it perfect. That's why we invented the concept of amendment." And I say that to say, we'll not, no single piece of legislation is ever going to be perfect.
Correct.
You're going to find some lawyer that finds a chink in the armor, finds a loophole, lacuna, whatever.
And you amend it accordingly as you go along.
That should be the drive of amendments, not
Yes.
special interest coming in and say, hey, I really need to do this kind of thing, this constrains me, unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that there aren't valid complaints in that regard either, but
Right.
those things shouldn't be a backdoor in a deal where
Easily identified.
that should be an open letter written saying,
Correct.
you have unconstitutionally constrained my rights, and I'm going to sue you unless we can resolve this. That's how that should happen, and then it's legitimate, right?
Right.
Folks do what they need to do to get the job done. At the end of the day, they have to survive too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These projects they have huge overheads. There's huge risk involved, and credit to those who've done it properly. And in the end, we have a project. You mightn't like the style of the building, you mightn't like the height of the buildings. Plenty of them I don't. But the reality of the matter is, if without that sort of development, our economy wouldn't be what it is, right? And we need.
But when is enough? And who are we building for?
Well, this is it. That there are things we can do. We can address the perversions of the process. That's what I call it. That were the misdeeds done by past governments. You need to address that right away. Right? I did a whole little spiel on that for one of the candidates in the last election. And it was shocking because when I did the deep dive into it, I saw the hundreds of LCCLs that were issued. I couldn't believe it. I remember when we had 6. All the big companies, McAlpine, has Faltic, Cable Wireless, CUC, and the 2 fuel companies, Esso and Texaco. Those are 6 LCCLs, and the only reason they were issued because there was no Caymanians who could.
They were not competing.
Financial load, and all of a sudden we went from that to hundreds.
And for the sake of those who may not understand that acronym, LCCL, local
company control license.
And that means that it's somebody applying for a license to conduct business that doesn't directly compete with any local businesses or interfere with Caymanian-owned operations. Am I right or wrong?
Right. That's what it's supposed to work. So just to touch on that, because it's important and it affects the development sphere as well. We have a trade and business license regime that says all companies must be Caymanian-owned and controlled.
Correct.
6 to Florida, we all know the 6 to Florida rule.
6 to Caymanian, 40 foreigner.
6 to Caymanian, 40% foreign, and we can't deviate from that unless it's 75%. It's upward in the Caymanian ownership.
Right.
And same with controlled directorships. Who, if you have 2 directors, they better both be Caymanian because they can't have equal standing. That was the rule, the immutable rule for a long time. The LCCL legislation provided though an exemption for companies where they seek local participation, but they can't get it. So those big companies that I spoke to earlier, they were at a level where no Caymanian could invest, 60% of the worth of Esso. Who would have been able to come like that? So a Cable and Wireless, a global giant. So we licensed them because they offered services that were essential, etc. We licensed them to exempt them from the trade and business license regime. It was intended to be a necessary exemption only, but in a past government, not calling on names, but the acronym started with P and ended with M. They started this free for all where they're just granting LCCLs to everybody walk off the plane. You get every foreigner comes here would get a LCCL, i.e. an exemption for foreign-owned entity to operate as a real estate agent, operate as a development company, a contractor company, whatever they needed. They were just given, and that is harming the economic interests. That is an offense to the stated principles and objectives of the development plan because that is antithetical to the promotion of the social well-being of the people of this country. You don't need to be no economist to figure that one out.
I figured that one out.
And so that is the perversion I spoke to earlier. But that can be remedied. and it should be remedied. It should at least be stopped to practice, and I hope it has been.
How?
By not granting LCCLs. Maybe the DCI structure needs to be looked at. I don't know, but if we follow the intent, the obvious intent of the trade and business license legislation, which unfortunately isn't the same as it used to be. I say unfortunately because now back in the day, every Caymanian had a right to get a trade and business license. Now you have to prove yourself worthy. That was something that happened in 2013 or 2014 that I wasn't. 2014, I think it was, by the then progressive government that I railed against, and I remember Arden McLean railing against it in the LA, as it was then called. But it passed, and that was bad enough. I don't think that directly impacted Cayman or prejudiced Caymanians vis-a-vis LCCLs, but it led to a new mindset where, well, Caymanians not entitled to own, and it's sort of this so informs this whole mindset or conforms to this whole mindset of Caymanian protection is xenophobic, nationalistic, all of that, and I had a conversation with a gentleman who I have a whole lot of respect for this morning, and he was saying certain things about that he's worried about what the government. And I said, I don't know if it's that bad. I think they are to start at a certain point, and they're making noises. Minister Miles has made certain proclamations that people are upset about that, and I'm saying, well, look, we gotta do something. We have to do something, and it's not him on a I think it's the government. In fact, I pretty much I'm assured it's a government position, and instead of focusing, this would be my advice to government. Instead of focusing only on like protecting Caymanians against foreigners coming and living here forever, etc. Right? That's not the real risk. The real risk is being displaced economically, being disenfranchised.
It's a delicate balance.
That's and at the same time we because we have more affluence entering the island, prices start to inflate, and we have then a cost of living issue ballooning out of control because we already have a cost. We are the third most expensive country on earth according to one survey I saw the other day, behind Singapore and Monaco. Yeah, and Monaco is and Singapore is full of millionaires. I don't think we are. I really struggle to I really feel the pain and the struggle of folks who earn a regular salary because I don't know how they survive with all the costs, but that's a whole different topic.
Well, yeah, we could go on for days, and oh my God, Connie and all of those who normally used to meet exiting stage left before even 7 o'clock. Look, Sammy, we went over 7. We're in time.
Well, I'm probably waxing a bit philosophical now, anyhow. So rather than discussing the topic at hand, but
no, but I think the reason why we have gone down so much different avenues,
it's all connected. It's all connected,
and it proves a point that it's not as simple as one may think. But we can't just roll over and expect it to happen. We have to continue forums like this. We constantly have to honestly engage in more meaningful discussion like this, but don't play ostrich if you're in a position of power. Don't put your head in a hole because you're not helping the situation either. And I'm hoping that forums like this, as you rightfully alluded to, shows that people are listening, that we're coming from an informed perspective. We're not coming after anybody. We're educating. And the biggest takeaway is that there's a lot more discussion that needs to be had, but more in a consolidated piece by piece process for our purpose. But the bigger mandate is how are we going to do it from the top? But Sammy, closing words for today's episode of Sabrina Speaks. And again, the floor is open for you. The space is open for you. If you want to then, with what we've taken away from today's episode, come one day and maybe want to break it down, one piece of legislation, tie that back into how that could possibly impact a decision or how a decision is made from the planning thing. I'm trying to paint the picture here so that we can have a more meaningful discussion for people to understand it. And then maybe from that piece of legislation, explain what some of the nuances nationally or nuances with that piece of legislation are, and how it can impact nationally and whether or not it aligns with our constitution. To me, that's the best way forward. And I invite other persons, like-minded persons in the industry to possibly join us as guests. Because it's not me and you.
And the counter view too. There might be people who vehemently oppose some of the things I say.
Exactly.
They have every right to
and that's why I love this space, because this is what it's all about. We want to have an entire full circle view and opinions because they matter.
Yeah.
But this is your opportunity. Any closing words?
I think we've exhausted it for today, but all I was saying earlier is the reason we strayed so far afield, I think, is demonstrative of the fact that it's all connected.
Yeah.
It's, we're talking about sort of the social economic fabric of the Cayman Islands, and we need to figure that out. We need to figure it out pretty soon, because a lot of things are going wrong in lots of countries on Earth, and I got a suspicion that is going to lead to an influx of folks from abroad. And if we don't have this stuff figured out by then, we are going. If you think we're gridlocked, no, in every sense of the word. Wait until 2-3 years time, see what it looks like. It's going to, and it might benefit. It might look like a benefit, an economic benefit to some, but we stand a very good chance of killing the proverbial goose that laid the golden egg. And I mean, we never mentioned today the beach replenishment, and that's deliberate. I didn't want to be hammering on that, because I think that needs to be figured out. I think we said enough about that on the last occasion.
Yeah, I think we did.
That's all part of it. That's all part of it. We need to figure out what are our national assets, who should own them, who should benefit from them, etc., and figure all of that out. And it's a Herculean task, but I think there's enough people in government who understand the issues, and I think there's enough civil servants who, if they're tasked and they're directed properly, we can get it done, and of course with support from the private sector.
Yeah. But again, Sammy, thank you so much for joining us on another edition of Sabrina Speaks. Your invaluable expertise speaks volumes, and it's not only your opinion, but based on experience. And even though it's valued, we invite persons like yourself, even like you rightfully said, from the other side to the space. But, I just want to thank you for putting yourself public to do this despite your job, your responsibilities. And, this is what we're all about. We just can't honestly just lock ourselves behind and think it's going to go away. And I thank you for being so bold and brave for doing this. I appreciate you very much.
It's what we have to do.
Exactly. Until next time, Sammy, thank you. And again, don't be a stranger. I'm always here.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. I just want to thank all of you for staying with us. I must apologize for, we were having some streaming issues at the beginning of this, and I know you were searching like crazy for the live stream. We will be working that out. We worked behind the scenes trying to get the streaming back up again. That's technical issues beyond my control. We continued because I know some people were actually getting the stream. But yeah, we started at 5 and we went in double overtime today by almost 10 minutes. But I want to thank all of the persons who participated, all their callers. You are actually the purpose for this show. And your feedbacks, be it directly or indirectly, is valuable for the continuation and success of this show. And I want to let you know that your conversations shouldn't and doesn't stop here. And I will encourage each and everyone to get involved. And I want you to stay informed and be a part of the solution. And being a part of the solution doesn't mean you stay in the corner and you don't say anything. But we need to be part of the solution for sustainable Cayman Islands, because this is our home. Until next time, it has been a pleasure bringing you today's edition of Sabrina Speaks. And tomorrow, look for a brighter day. Until next time. Have a wonderful evening.
That's a wrap for today's edition of Sabrina Speaks. Thank you for tuning in and for being part of the conversation. Remember, the dialogue doesn't stop here. Stay engaged, stay informed, and most importantly, stay empowered. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m., same time, same place, right here on CMR TV and radio, where your voice matters and your truth is heard. Until then, Cayman, take care of yourself and each other.
That's it for today's edition of Sabrina Speaks, where your voice matters, your story counts, and your truth is always welcome. Join us weekdays from 5 until 6:30 p.m. right here on CMR TV as we dive into the topics that matter most to you. Catch the show live or on demand at cmrtv.com. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram so you never miss a moment. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and always speak your truth.